Developed by Axis Games and published by Microsoft in 2014, Dark Dreams Don't Die is the third game directed by Walking Mad Lib's Swary65. His real name is Hidetaka Suehiro, but calling him that feels like calling a pro wrestler by their real name. I don't know him like that. Here are 3 unrelated true facts about Swary. He has a full back Yakuza-style tattoo of a stuffed monkey, he is a Buddhist monk, and he worked on Last Blade 2. We have found somebody immune to hyperbole! Swary's journey as a game developer is about as eclectic as the last 3 things you learned about him, writing scenarios for SNK fighting games before moving on to be a designer for games like Tomba 2 and Extermination for the company Whoopee Camp. Once that company shut down, he and the other employees would join back up under the Access Games name and develop the previous 2 games Swary directed. Well, I'm sure somebody has heard of spy fiction. The game you'd know Swary for is his second, Deadly Premonition. Deadly Premonition is a very hard game to explain. Unless you've seen Twin Peaks. Then it's pretty easy. Deadly Premonition is greater than the sum of its parts. Any one part of it looked at in isolation would look terrible. The game looks like a PS2 game that just happens to be on PS3. There's an open world, despite what the game can handle. The audio balancer was deaf in 2 ears, and the story is so bizarre, you'll be wondering if the writer was even human. Then you'll remember it was Swary. And then you'll keep wondering. And the people who love this game will tell you all of this themselves. They'll come down on this game harsher than any of its critics. And when you ask them if you should try it out, oh hell yeah, it's Deadly Premonition! Despite everything the game gets wrong, there is an undeniable charm to it. No matter how strange the idea or unrealistic the mechanic, the game tries its best to do everything it wants to do. All of these janky mechanics and weird characters come together to make something that pulls you in with how Deadly Premonition the whole thing is. In a time where games are allowed less and less to stand out and leave a lasting legacy all on their own, Deadly Premonition stands out for how uncompromising it is. Some people end up loving it, others end up hating it. You don't earn the Guinness World Record for most divisive horror game of all time by playing it safe. Regardless, Deadly Premonition built up a cult following that made a lot of people interested in whatever Swary would make next. Not excited. Let's be frank here. Interested. The monkey holding a gun is not exciting, it's interesting. It's going to be a Kinect game. That's exactly what I expected. Swary was enchanted by Microsoft's new peripheral that dropped the same year as Deadly Premonition, so with nothing on his plate, he and Access Games would get to work figuring out what they could do with the Kinect and how to make a fun game with it. It would start out as a 360 game before transitioning to the Xbox One to take advantage of the improvements made with the new Kinect. And pretty soon, Microsoft caught wind that a Japanese developer was interested in the Kinect. They could barely get one of those things, a Japanese developer or interest in the Kinect. Once they found out Access was interested in making a Kinect game, they footed the bill of the game's development as an investment. You'd have thought Microsoft hated Swary and the game he was making for them, though, for how poor the marketing was. Across all of the press conferences and events Microsoft attended where this new game could have been shown off, how much time do you think it got? 5 seconds. A single sizzle reel was all this new Kinect game got to advertise itself. Microsoft wasn't the only one trying to kill the game, though. Swary also seemed to have a vendetta against it when the choice was made to shadow drop it a day after the 2014 Tokyo Game Show. The actual explanation Swary gave to this was that Steve Jobs would do that sort of thing when new Apple products launched, so he would be able to do it with his new game. He's taking inspiration from the first man ever killed by Smurfs. The game that had everything going against it was Dark Dreams Don't Die, D4 to its friends, a Kinect point-and-click adventure game in the style of the recent smash hit Telltale's The Walking Dead. Speaking of that actually, that little game that nobody liked wasn't just Dark Dreams Don't Die, it was D4 Season 1. Along the way of development for Dark Dreams Don't Die, it was decided to turn it into an episodic game that would release new seasons periodically to give gamers the full story. I don't think it's any big surprise with how all of this has been going, but we never got to see the ending of Dark Dreams Don't Die. Or the middle, or even episode 2. D4 is an episodic game with only one episode, Floygen Brothers style. After the game failed to find its audience, Swary would end up leaving Access Games and the games industry, citing health problems. I do think there is more to this, though, since when he was asked about if he would buy the rights to D4, Swary hesitated and asked, where would that money go and who would it go to? Implying he didn't want to give Access Games the money for something that happened in the past. Japanese game development is famously tight-lipped, though, so unless he gets drunk on stage with Suda51 again, we're likely to not get a good idea of what really happened. What we're left with is a game that never got above first gear, left to rot as a fraction of what it was supposed to be. I've known about D4 for a long time, but it only really went as deep as remembering the Mega 64 sketch and Zero Punctuation review. I don't think I had ever actually seen the game itself until I decided to check it out. And now it's time to see what's left of Dark Dreams Don't Die. The game starts with a prologue to the prologue, where you play as a little girl walking out alone on a frozen lake. Her father is safe 2 miles away in case something happens. You get the bare essentials of gameplay during this quick section. You can hover your cursor over certain objects to either interact with them or get a brief description. The longer you hover over, the more info pops up, with some characters and items having 6 or 7 or 8 different entries. This also shows that Swary is smarter than 90% of every Kinect developer, by tying movement to specific spots on a map rather than letting you get up and pretend to walk from place to place. In a talk done at the Game Developers Conference in 2015, Swary went into a lot of the design of Dark Dreams Don't Die, and specifically the motion controls. He would record basic actions and then try to recreate them in the game, and found that complicated motions made the game taxing to play for long periods of time and confusing to keep track of. As a result, the extent of motion controls in this game are swipes, highlighting, and extremely simple motions. This doesn't matter as much, since the game was also controller compatible out of the gate, but with the PC release supporting mouse controls, the ideas are still present and they work really well. You're not overwhelmed with confusing inputs that risk failing to register, while still getting to feel like you're in control of your character. Once the prologue ends, we get introduced to our main character, David Young, a former cop from Boston specializing in narcotics. There's a few clues across the game to help you find out that David's from Boston. Some articles in his house mention the Bruins winning the Stanley Cup, you talk about clam chowder, and also every time he opens his goddamn mouth.
Trouble? Me? Your watch was about to fall off. It looks expensive, so I didn't think you'd want to lose it. I'm just a polite, helpful passenger. Look, Ref, if you're gonna bench anyone, bench her.
He left the force to take on a cold case, the murder of his wife, Little Peggy. That's her name. Please respect Little Peggy, she's dead. David can only remember 2 things about the day she died: the bullet he took to the brain, and Peggy's last words. Look for D. Ever since, David's been combing through the whole of New England for anybody with a D in their name and seeing if they killed Little Peggy. Getting control of David, you get the chance to tool around his apartment and interact with pretty much everything. David's apartment tells you as much of a story as the plot does, with all the stuff you can do in it. Go into the bedroom and mess around with old newspapers and trophies. You can eat out of the fridge, play records, or even watch TV. Some of these will even trigger flashbacks to the time he spent with Little Peggy, where it becomes clear she was pregnant when she was killed. All of these interactable bits don't hold any importance aside from flavor. Historic hockey scores might have played a part in Season 2, but here they're just set dressing. It does still serve an important purpose, though. Every note you find around the apartment, every shot of tequila, every floor swept, makes you feel for David a little more. The descriptions you get when hovering over items are done in character. So, in the first part, you get that little girl's thoughts on what she's seeing, and in the apartment, you get David's. So you get to see what he thinks about the home he lives in, and he's clearly unhappy. Anything he used to do with little Peggy reminds him of her. He comments on how big his bed feels now without her, and how he can't watch cartoons they used to watch together. It's heartbreaking. This was another part of Swary's talk at GDC that I really latched onto. That unnecessary actions still require attention. You don't need any of this in the game. It doesn't help you beat it. But it does help you enjoy it more. You care more about David, and therefore want to see him succeed. And you'll do better in moments when he's in danger. Speaking of danger, the door to your apartment opens, and oh, this is a Japanese game! This begins our first action sequence. You have to nail QuickTime events back to back to make it to the end, but unlike other games, there's minimal consequence for failure. You have a health system, but I don't think there are many, if any, scenarios where death is possible, unless you're really bad at the game. The most typical type of control in these sections is swiping your hand across the screen in the direction of the action. If David needs to duck, swipe down. Dodge left or right, swipe that way. If David gets something thrown at him, hover your hand over it to catch. These are those simple controls I mentioned, and they come together to make an amazing system for a QTE-based game. Like with the other genre standout, Asura's Wrath, these aren't pointless button presses or stock stick waggling. The direction-based input of these sections makes you feel like a conductor of the action, giving you a level of control that's very hard to replicate with standard QTEs. In later action sections, you can even find yourself predicting the next QTE by paying attention to the flow of action. If you have to cock David's fist, you can probably guess the next action is throwing it by swiping across the screen. This makes for an awesome sense of control that can only be achieved by fully understanding what your hardware is capable of. Swary and Access Games knew what the Kinect was good at and honed in on that, not trying to push it past its limits, instead working within its boundaries. It also ties into the Synchro rating system, where the game will grade you based on how well you're in sync with David. This is in both how well you do during the QTEs, but also during dialogue. If you answer a question how David would answer it, then the game rewards you with bonus points. Oh, you had me at points. This very controlled style of play also helps to solve a problem that Swary games often have. Deadly Premonition 2, The Good Life, Hotel Barcelona all have something in common besides the Martian responsible for making them. Their eyes are much bigger than their stomachs. See, The Good Life couldn't have just been a debt-paying RPG. No, it has to have 100 side quests where you do nothing of value and waste all your time. Same goes for Deadly Premonition 2 and its 400 stamps. Dark Dreams Don't Die, meanwhile, has a very limited focus on what it wants to do, and doesn't bloat itself to the point of popping with stuff that doesn't enrich the game. You limit the scope, and it gets much better. Oh, you're still wondering about the cat girl, aren't you? This is Amanda, a cat-themed vagrant. She lives in David's house. This is about as far as we get relationship-wise, and nobody cares to explain why she's doing all this. I'm pretty sure she's an actual cat, and this is just how David sees her. Except, no, wait, she gets him groceries, and there's no way an actual cat could do that. She runs the in-game shop, where you can buy new clothes for David, as well as her and a few other supporting characters. The goal of this game mode is to make David look like as big of a jackass as you can. I think I did good. Yeah, here's your comedy mustache, everybody. He's just a big fan of May 2010 Michael Jordan. Along with Amanda is Forrest Kaysen, aka Teddy, David's old co-worker from the Boston PD, who's helping him with his investigation into D. Forrest is something of a signature for Swary, as all of the games he's directed include a character named Forrest Kaysen. not the same character each time, since Deadly Premonition puts him on the other side of the law as a murderer, but he always shows up. He's got a lead for David tied to a recent plane crash: the disappearance of a drug dealer named Antonio Rabbit Zapatero. He dealt the drug Real Blood, the same drug found in Little Peggy's system when she died. And the man above him apparently has a name starting with D. That letter is more than enough to get David on the case. Small problem, we just heard he vanished in a plane crash. Not a problem for David, though, since he has the power to travel through time using items with intense sentimental value called mementos. It's not like the movie Memento. That was a movie. This is a video game. After Teddy gives him a badge found at the crash site, which acts as a memento, David's ready to dive into the past and figure out how this is all related to D. Before diving, you can look around the apartment again for more details, like how David's fridge was cleaned up by Teddy. A really sweet detail that's thrown off by the entire crab David is keeping in his fridge that you can eat whole to regain stamina. Food plays an important role in D4, since you only have so much stamina to perform actions with, like opening cupboards and talking to people. Food regains your stamina, drinks regain your vision, which highlights interactables, and bandages restore your health. You can fill your stamina up to full by talking to Teddy and turning this into a horror game.
Teddy, what are you doing? You're a beast! You're an animal! Not 18 hot dogs at the same time! Oh my god! Teddy, this isn't even fat guy behavior! You're just a demon! From hell!
Talking to Teddy during these, though, are honestly my favorite moments in the game. Games written by Swary and his co-writer, Kenji Goda, have a real knack for charming writing, especially with character dialogue. Watching David play with his food while him and Teddy talk about how much they hate smartphones or debate if Boston has the best clam chowder instantly ingratiates you to them as characters. They have a great rapport, and you get the sense these guys are longtime friends without having to be told. This is also thanks to the voice acting. David's accent might be incredibly goofy, but it eventually fades into the subconscious, and you appreciate the energy, wit, and passion that actor Ben Pronsky is bringing to the role. Same with David Lodge as Forrest. What does it say that he's played two massive, ungodly monstrosities, and I'd still rather hang out with the dragon?
The rantings of an up-jump zealot make for tedious listening. Clam chowder.
Going to the bathroom, we're able to dive into the past using the badge, and are now aboard the plane we just saw go down. We only just get out of the airplane bathroom before running into a new character, Olivia. She's the spitting image of Little Peggy, but bigger and not dead. Going further, and we meet all the suspects David's looking for. By that I mean everybody with a D in their name. David, don't look now, you're surrounded! There's Zapatero, the man who knows about D, Derek, an air marshal whose badge we used to dive into the past, Philip, a flight attendant with a trustworthy face, Deborah, a worrywart who documents everything around her, and Duncan.
Would it have killed them to use a little real stitching? Honestly.
And who might you...
I don't ask for opinions from the uninspired. Suki, baby, what do you think? Dress all the seats white, then crown them with a single pink stag beetle? Oh, yes!
This is some interesting trivia about Duncan and Suki. It actually applies to Amanda, too. These characters don't appear during normal gameplay. They only appear when your parents walk in the room. He's a fashion designer with a mannequin partner who keeps yelling,
Oh, my God!
They picked this because it's the one phrase Bostonians can't say.
Avant-garde!
So, in an interview with Swary about D4 and specifically Microsoft's involvement, a note from Microsoft higher-ups was to include more meme moments. Moments like the Sinner's sandwich scene in Deadly Premonition that would stand out. I think between the food scenes with Teddy and Duncan's entire character, it's not hard to see where Swary fit in this mandate. Kinda reflects in Duncan being easily the least involved with the whole story. Most of these characters, except for Zapatero, have little side quests you can do for them to get some extra points and learn more about them, and David in the process. Derek has you collecting a George Washington plush after he said he would only give his secrets up to the president himself, or with regular-sized Peggy, you can help her find the employee's handbook for the plane. They're not complicated, but some require a bit of lateral thinking to get past. The second Derek mission is to find that day's newspaper, which would be impossible on an airplane. David, though, has that newspaper in his apartment, so you can leave the dive, grab the paper, and bring it back to finish the quest. Some even require multiple playthroughs, like Duncan's fashion mission, needing you to complete a later mission to unlock a certain outfit before going back to the start of the episode. These don't add much gameplay-wise, all of them boil down to needing to find a hidden object, but they add value for getting to talk to these weirdos some more. You're able to advance further by provoking Deborah and getting her to distract Philip, and from there it's smooth sailing. I'm not gonna talk about him, what if he hears me? Before we're able to figure anything out about this tall drink of water, a lightning bolt hits the plane and gives Zapatero time to escape from Derek, which leads you to a fight with him. You used to be able to do this on planes before 9/11. Winner got a pack of cigarettes. F it, this could have been the pilot, that's how you got a plane. This great scene is underscored by a song called Drank Dead Dom Die, named after what Don Matrick probably thought D4 stood for. To reinforce how David is from Boston, the song is inspired by the state song of Massachusetts, Shippin' Out to Boston by the Dropkick Murphys. It sounds really good, and I was sure it was licensed or something, but no. The lyrics make multiple references to looking for D, so the song was made for the game. The music in D4 is killer on the whole. Tracks are either fittingly atmospheric or great to listen to on their own. The actual theme of Dark Dreams Don't Die, along with the opening credits, like this was an episode of a TV show, was probably when I was fully sold on this game as something special. The scene as well balances a lot of what makes the game great. It's intense with how hard the hits come in, but also goofy when David gets hit in the nuts and the two take a time out to recover. If anything's gonna sell you on how special D4 really is, it's the scene where Zapatero starts throwing baseballs at David, then David grabs Suki's severed leg, and the two impromptu decide that a baseball fight would be the most fun thing to do. It ends rather abruptly after another lightning strike hits, as the scene becomes weird. Everybody's still on the plane, save for Zapatero and Olivia, and the people who said they knew David, like Derek and Philip, suddenly don't recognize him. What happened was, the lightning strike forced David deeper into his dive and put him not on the flight from Washington to Boston, but the flight before that, before Zapatero was apprehended. You have to collect evidence around the plane to confirm this, and I really like the structure. When you start out, you get more incidental evidence that gives you a vague idea of what's happening. An out-of-date ticket, or the seasonal seat covers being switched. The further you get to the back of the plane, though, the more blatant the evidence becomes. Like the sun being on the opposite side of the plane, or Philip specifically naming Reagan Airport instead of JFK. You're still gonna need to collect all the evidence before you can advance, but I like how it's structured out to give you a chance to solve it on your own before getting the most obvious hints. Once you get all your evidence, you confront Derek because... you gotta confront somebody in Duncan's smells, so who better? After you get your explanation, though, David is knocked out in the bathroom and forced out of his dive, ending episode 1. Episode 2 is much less content-rich than the first, with its dive and pre-dive sequences being significantly shorter. That doesn't mean there's no important info, though. Namely that the ball that we hit back at Zapatero during our fight became a memento, with David taking this as a sign that he can in fact change the past. Everybody from Teddy to little Peggy tells him that's not possible, but he just got all the proof he needs to show he can. Diving back to the past again, and we're back on the flight, only this time in the cargo hold. Olivia's there too, and we learn that her and a guy named Delta are DEA agents investigating the plane. DEA agents, you say? David and Olivia call a truce once they hear over the radio that Derek has taken Zapatero to the cargo hull at the front of the ship, and the two work together to make it up there. David, this is why no one takes you seriously. We get another chat with the giant doctor from before and confront Derek as he's beating the crap out of Zapatero. Derek's wife and daughter had been killed by a user of the real blood drug that Zapatero dealt, and so Derek has only taken real blood cases in order to kill everybody involved with the drug. You actually get a hint at this in an earlier scene when you note how much younger Derek's wife is from him. That's because it's an old picture, and they've been dead for a long time. Before we get him to back down, a power wire snakes into the room, kills Derek, and we get to see who Delta really is. It's Philip, hopped up on real blood. How he snuck up on us in the bathroom when he's the size of a fridge must be light on his feet. The fight between David and the final D begins next time on Dark Dreams Don't Die. Shame there is no next time on Dark Dreams Don't Die. D4 ends on a massive cliffhanger as we lose out on our lead on D and get face to face with a massive monster man. After the credits, we get a scene of Teddy meeting up with August Oldman, a name he had to grow into, Little Peggy's foster father, who's somehow involved with all of this. That, like every other mystery in the game, goes unanswered, as what we have is all we'll ever have of Dark Dreams Don't Die. Kinda, we'll get to it. That doesn't mean we can't have a bit of fun post-mortem and guess at what the story would have been and what we have really means. One of my favorite fan theories involves the giant doctor we see, Roland Walken. The theory goes that Walken is the doctor who operated on David. A pretty sound one off of the bat, as one of Deborah's journal entries details a successful bullet wound surgery conducted by a Dr. R.W. The other points of the theory, though, go to explain why Roland is so weird. He's unnaturally tall, having to bend his head at an angle to stand in the plane. He's so tall because, to David, while lying on the operating table, Roland would have looked gigantic. He talks so slow because David was under anesthesia while getting surgery, so Roland would have sounded like he was in slow motion. Now, I don't think that this Roland is the same guy who did the surgery. It would be a massive HIPAA violation to implant yourself in your patient's mind. I think that whatever gave David his power to dive when he got shot manifested itself as the first person David recognized after being shot, which in this case would have been Roland. As for who killed little Peggy, I have a sneaking suspicion that it could have been David. So, off the bat, obviously, David is a D. And one of the first things I noticed was in the scene where we first meet David. He lists off his likes and dislikes, with his dislikes being drugs and chewing gum. This is followed by him popping a bubble. And he's chewing gum in every single scene in the game. I think this is a setup. David blatantly enjoying one of his dislikes is meant to set up that if he chews gum, he might also take drugs. I think that David, during his time in the narcotics division, either became a high-functioning real blood user, or at least had ample access to it. Through journal entries, we learn that real blood has the ability to give its users incredible powers and do the impossible, which could include traveling back in time. We also learn that little Peggy was an incredibly sick woman, having anemia and a blood-borne illness that gave her problems for her entire life. With a baby on the way and the chance of little Peggy's body not being able to handle the stress, maybe a distraught David talked to little Peggy into taking real blood, to give her the strength she needed to carry out the pregnancy. Little Peggy reacts badly, goes berserk like other real blood users, shoots David, and that explains why David and Peggy are the only two with DNA found at the crime scene. It then explains why David says that he's doing all of this to see little Peggy one more time. Apologize for getting her killed by making her take real blood. If you need setup for David being an unreliable narrator about not being able to remember anything, listen closely to when little Peggy says, "Look for D." She actually says, "Don't look for D," but the "don't" is very, very quiet, David blocking out a part of his memory.
Look for D.
It also helps to show why August seems to be working against David, or is at least keeping a close eye on him. He was the first person to find David and little Peggy and was distraught, his hair instantly turning sheet white, like that one character in Twin Peaks. After researching all there is to know about little Peggy's disease, he probably realized it was exacerbated by the real blood found in her system, and rightfully blames David for her death. That's why he's working with Teddy behind the scenes to try and get revenge. It would also explain why Teddy is trying to stop David from changing the past. Aside from working with Oldman, Teddy also knows that David is self-destructing by trying so hard to go to the past. He's been spiraling ever since losing little Peggy, and these dives are David's way of silently killing himself by working himself to death. He frequently gets nosebleeds when he tries to dive, and the only other time we see him get one is when he first meets Roland, a manifestation of a near-death experience. There's even a theory that Oldman is a future version of David who lived to regret what he did, dived into the past to raise little Peggy, and start from zero to see if he could save her life in a different way. That one goes much, much deeper, though, with David raising his own wife and trying to stop his past-future self from killing his current past daughter. You know what? It's probably not worth talking about. Not like any of it really matters. Swary has said multiple times that D4 Season 2, or any sort of wrap-up, is not happening. What we have is what we get. There is one more piece of media related to Dark Dreams Don't Die, and it's a Travis Strikes Again Shadows of the Dam styled reference in Swary's Deadly Premonition 2. That game is also set in Boston, and in a cutscene visiting Francis York Morgan's brother, you hear about a former Boston narcotics officer holed up in his apartment above you, making noise and trying to solve his wife's murder. The team who was working on the case wanted to keep it up, but the higher-ups decided to pull the plug. This is about as blunt a metaphor as you can get for what happened to Dark Dreams Don't Die, a game that had the team who was passionate about it, but ultimately got the rug pulled out from under it. Never to be solved. Cope, I know, but it kind of adds to the allure of Dark Dreams Don't Die. Without any concrete answers, or even the hope of a concrete answer, the mind is allowed to roam and make up whatever conclusions you want based on what happens in the game. Seeing all the animations and set pieces that were meant to reappear in multiple episodes, like the dive and case solve animations, just makes you think how much more they had to make and what they had already finished. The only info we ever got about Season 2 was a picture Swary shared of Olivia and a hockey stick. That's all we got. It's fun to speculate on, but it's sad when speculate is all we'll ever get to do. I didn't have high expectations going into Dark Dreams Don't Die. Truthfully, all I remembered about the game were some cutscenes in an airplane and that people didn't really like it. I gave it a chance for myself, though, and I can honestly say I think it's fantastic. It's a cliche, I don't even know if it's true, but they don't make games like Dark Dreams Don't Die anymore. At least not from major publishers. This is a bizarre game that doesn't set out to appeal to anybody in particular. It wants to tell a very interesting, unique story in an off-the-walls way, with characters that push the boundaries of what you expect from a video game character. I think it's Swary's most focused game, not adding on mechanics or ideas it can't handle like Deadly Premonition or Hotel Barcelona did. It's very deliberate with what it includes, why it's included, and has a solid idea of what's capable. And funnily enough, that's because it's a Kinect game. They had very specific circumstances the game could be made under, and it led to them figuring out how best to use this very unwieldy piece of hardware. It sounds like a tall ask, but just like with Deadly Premonition, it ends up greater than the sum of its parts. I think everybody should try Dark Dreams Don't Die. I think it's a testament to what can be done when creative freedom is put at the forefront and what's expected from gaming is disregarded. That's how you get a goofy detective story with a focus on clam chowder using the Kinect to work perfectly. That individualism gives the game a charm you don't get from a game that holds back or worries about if people will vibe with it, that worries about mass appeal. The game is gonna be itself, and it's up to you if you're going to be able to accept it as it is. It hurts my heart to know that this is the last we'll ever see of Dark Dreams Don't Die, but I'm thankful I got to see it at all.